Okay. The ancient Greeks thought that there were two types of life, the natural life and the political life. The political life is a particular way of life. It's a value-laden life. You could be described as living a hedonistic life or a disciplined life. You can evaluate those ways of life as good or bad. But the natural life is a simple, pure living, free from further qualities. Many social contract theorists seem to make this distinction. Thomas Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau both conceived of a state of nature prior to organized society, where people lived a natural life. But upon entering society, they had to give up that natural life for a political one, subject to descriptors and evaluation. The people on social media who romanticize a rural life in a secluded little farm seem to be trying to get at this natural life. However, for the philosopher Giorgio Agamben, in our current age, there is no form of life that is completely unpolitical. Agamben is interested in biopolitics, or biopower, which very broadly is about how power controls the life and death of individual biological bodies in order to manage the larger population. For example, when women of color were sterilized in the 20th century, this control over their individual bodies was also to influence the features of the whole population. I want to flag that that was a major oversimplification of biopolitics, but I'll live with it for now. So, in a way, biopower recognizes that natural life is kind of blended into political life, such that there is no clean distinction between the two. As we'll see soon in this video, even life that supposedly exists outside of the political state is only excluded through their political inclusion. This might sound confusing, but bear with me. Michel Foucault also spoke a lot about biopolitics. He said, quote, "Modern man is an animal whose politics calls his existence as a living being into question." But not everyone's existence seems included in politics in the same way. When the OceanGate submarine with 5 billionaires went missing, the level of public support and panic exploded faster than the submarine. It was one of the largest joint search and rescue responses in American and Canadian history, and was at the top of every news site for days. Canada spent $3 billion on the planes they deployed to look for the submarine, and this doesn't even include the millions of dollars that were spent on the ships that they sent out. Funnily enough, in this CBC article, Rear Admiral John Mauger of the US Coast Guard said, quote, "As a matter of US law, we don't charge for search and rescue, nor do we associate a cost with human life. We always answer the call." I wonder what the Admiral would say to the families of lost fishermen who wondered why this dedication and resources were unavailable when their loved ones went missing, or the thousands of migrants with their children stuck in the waters, escaping from literal war and prosecution. Their calls for help don't only go unanswered, but they are often villainized. And before you say, well, they're not American citizens, they don't count, then that means you are associating a cost with certain human lives, and that defeats the purpose of human rights, when the moment people need to be protected by rights is the exact moment they lose their rights. One way of examining this discrepancy between the treatment of different lives is through thanatopolitics, the politics of death. Thanato coming from not that guy, from the ancient Greeks, and politics is referring to biopolitics. So when Agamben uses the word thanatopolitics, he's referring to a form of biopolitical power that would justify killing certain people. In other words, while the certainty of death plays a role in all of our lives as mortal beings, how does power make it okay to kill some people and not others? When thousands of indigenous children were being killed in residential schools, why did the residential school teachers and administrators leave scot-free? Why did it take decades for the government and the larger public to condemn what happened? When a doctor pulls the plug on a comatose body that's been on life support, why is that not considered murder? What allows for some bodies to have a radically different relationship with death? And what allows certain individuals to make those decisions about death? In our present time, I think most people attribute it to dehumanization. By putting someone in a less than human category, it becomes acceptable to kill them, as though they are an animal. But I think Agamben has an interesting and different answer. He seems to notice that whenever a person's life is intentionally ended, it typically falls into two categories. If killing wrongs someone, that constitutes murder. But people have also killed as a positive valuation of life. When communities would sacrifice human life to the gods, that life was sacred in some special way. So you have murder on the one end, sacrifice on the other. But what about the human being who has been divested of any value, who has ceased to matter in a way that would make their killing count as homicide? Agamben says these people have become homo sacer, someone who can be killed but not sacrificed. Oh wait, Olivia, I thought you said sacred life was a positive valuation of life that can be sacrificed. Well, Agamben is using a different meaning of sacred. He has a chapter in his book Homo Sacer where he cites a bunch of different texts throughout history that point to the ambiguous meaning of sacred, how it's linked to concepts like taboo or cursed. Dehumanization still places value on certain lives, but they're less valuable or have negative value. However, Homo Sacer is almost made to seem like it's a natural valueless life that exists outside of the political state, which justifies its killing. This is why Agamben also uses the term bare life to describe Homo Sacer, because it is life that is bare of any political qualification. But he says these lives aren't naturally bare. It's a political decision to make some lives Homo Sacer. So in an almost paradoxical way, bare life is also political. The very fact that this Homo Sacer life is constantly under threat by the social order indicates its relation to politics. Once again, we see this blurring between natural life and political life. Homo Sacer exists in a, quote, zone of indistinction, where it is both included and excluded from political life. Agamben gives the example of ancient Germanic law that labeled some people as without peace and then exiled them. Once you were exiled, anyone could do anything to you. Like Homo Sacer, the exiled person could be killed without it being murder. But even though they're cast out of the city, they still sustain a connection to the city. The fact that people from the city can kill the exile is because the exile is still related to the political state through their exclusion. It's kind of like when you leave a relationship, your ex will always retain a relation to you by virtue of being your ex. So Homo Sacer is included through exclusion. This naturally leads to the question, who produces Homo Sacer, or bare life? For Agamben, it is sovereign power. Today, the common use of the word sovereign refers to nations or rulers like kings and dictators, and Agamben certainly is thinking about those sorts of power, but he is also thinking about people like doctors, police, judges, anyone or any institution that operates in what he calls a state of exception, where regular laws are suspended. It's just like states of emergency in our modern legal system. All of us probably, if not definitely, experienced something like this during the height of the COVID pandemic, where the government was allowed to forcibly close businesses and impose curfews, all of which would normally violate our legal right to freedom of movement. But in a state of emergency, the state can do anything for the sake of controlling the emergency. But Agamben notices that this state of exception, which is supposed to be an exception, often becomes the rule. He gives several examples of this, but the main one he focuses on are the death camps or concentration camps in Nazi Germany. He definitely had Hannah Arendt in mind, who was a Jewish philosopher, and she wrote about the ways in which the Nazis actively stripped Jewish people of their citizenship before murdering them.
So wie mir das befohlen war, ich musste ja das machen, was mir befohlen wurde.
She says by taking away citizenship, by creating stateless people, the Jewish people were unable to appeal to human rights, even though we're all told that you're supposed to have human rights just by virtue of being human. What all of this seemed to show is that human rights are not actually natural and inalienable the way institutions claim. Rather, human rights are rights of citizens, not for the stateless who are beyond legality, just like Homo Sacer who exists outside of the law. Thus, anything could be done to them without consequence. There's an awful irony about this. The moments people need to invoke their human rights the most are precisely the moments in which they are unable to do so. What allowed these death camps to succeed was because Germany was governed by Hitler, a sovereign that occupied a state of exception. There really were no legal procedures in Nazi Germany. Hitler's decisions would instantly become the law. He could arbitrarily decide which lives had value and which didn't, but he'd never break the law, because he, as a sovereign power, was producing the legal domain itself by always being outside of it. Thus, we see the state of exception become the norm. This is the root of biopolitics for Agamben, when decisions made outside the law are still considered legal and they determine what lives are politically relevant and irrelevant. Something very similar has been happening to another group of people that some Jewish people ironically don't want to acknowledge.
Israel.
The Israeli military is expanding its ground offensive.
Israel has been breaking international human rights law left and right, bombing hospitals, pouring concrete into Gaza's water. But why do world leaders not bat an eye?
Are you comfortable with the operation going on indefinitely, and is there any deal underway to free hostages?
I am mildly hopeful.
Agamben would say this is biopolitics at play. These world leaders aren't really bound by any laws. The only rule that does apply to sovereign power is that they are an exception to the law. Our world, just like the concentration camps, is governed by sovereign powers who operate in a state of exception. They can suspend the laws about murder when they are dealing with those who they have deemed to be homo sacer. They can send financial, military, and moral support to save some lives and ignore others.
The people of Ukraine resist their occupiers, they are heroes. When Russia bombed these buildings and those hospitals, these are war crimes. Same thing is done to the Palestinians, but when they resist their occupiers, they are called terrorists. And when these buildings are destroyed in Gaza, that's self-defense. So there is double standard that the world can see.
Countries like Canada and America refuse to recognize the legitimacy of Palestine as a state, because by treating Palestinians as stateless, as outside the law, they become homo sacer, who cannot appeal to human rights and thus can be killed with impunity. They become homo sacer, who are included in the political body only through their exclusion. In fact, Agamben says the modern political state was founded on the creation of homo sacer, that our political order depends on excluding some people as valueless lives existing outside of the law. Because to decide what life counts as political, the state needed to also decide the lower threshold of when life stops being political. It is as if every valorization and every politicization of life necessarily implies a new decision concerning the threshold beyond which life ceases to be politically relevant, becomes only sacred life, and as such can be eliminated without punishment. This is why Agamben does not think states of exception only exist in totalitarian regimes with death camps. He thinks the structure of the death camp as a state of exception that can produce homo sacer is present in current democracies as well. It just takes on more subtle forms that we need to learn to recognize. When doctors decide who qualifies for assisted dying and who doesn't, that's sovereign power determining the value of different lives. The doctors operate in a state of exception where they can kill certain lives without it being homicide. When a police officer can kill a 12-year-old boy who's playing with a toy the moment they arrive on scene, and then leave with 0 criminal charges, that's biopolitics letting sovereign power do whatever it wants. Just like how a dictator's decisions instantly become law, the decisions of these medical professionals and judicial actors have a similar structure. This seems to be reflecting Hannah Arendt's idea that totalitarianism and democracy aren't that different and can collapse into each other, especially when the state is founded on exclusion. Quote, until a completely new politics, that is, a politics no longer founded on the exception of bare life, is at hand, every theory and every praxis will remain imprisoned and immobile, and the beautiful day of life will be given citizenship only either through blood or death, or in the perfect senselessness to which the society of the spectacle condemns it. For people who are politically vocal online and are trying to fight for a world not founded on exclusion, I appreciate you, keep doing what you're doing, but I do want to remind you to be careful about being doxxed and having your information leaked. I've heard of doxers showing up at people's addresses or calling their family members. So I'm gonna introduce you all to Incogni, who is the sponsor of this video. I genuinely needed them because I've actually recently been a victim of fraud myself. I may or may not have lost $10,000 and may or may not have been getting hundreds of spam emails. Jokes aside, it's been really frustrating. The bank has been very resistant to returning my money, so I now realize how important it is to prevent my information from getting stolen in the first place. Anyways, I only signed up a week ago, but this is my dashboard. There are already a ton of removal requests that have been sent to data brokers, and there's an activity log at the bottom to see when requests are complete. I really liked a detailed view because you can look at specific companies to check how compliant they are with removal requests and how severe their information sharing practices are. The high-risk ones have identity theft and stalking in their associated risks, which was scary to read, but it makes me glad that I'm getting removed from those. Don't end up in the situation I did. If you click on my link in the description box, the first 100 people to use the code OliSunvia will get 60% off on Incogni. We're signing up for random services all the time just to get that single discount code. But most of these companies are trading your data behind your back, and you have a right to request data brokers to delete their information about you. Did you hear that, Americans? This is a fight for your rights. You can be one of the first 100 people to fight for your rights by clicking on the link in the description box and use the code OliSunvia to get 60% off Incogni. That's incogni.com/OliSunvia, and you can use code OliSunvia to get your personal data off the market. Okay, where was I? Now, it's important to note that Agamben's view is only one view on biopolitics. Someone like Foucault conceived of biopolitics as a network rather than individual sovereigns. For him, a police officer who can kill a child without criminal charges is because of all the racist discourse surrounding black criminality, the norms about respecting authority, and so on. But the police officer and the judges are just individuals shaped by and caught in this network. They're not the ones actually holding power. I'm not here to tell you who's more right. You can think about it. Does Foucault provide a more holistic account of power? Is he able to better untangle deep systematic oppression than Agamben? Or does Foucault take too much responsibility away from individual actors by construing them as products of discourse? One other thing that might seem puzzling about Agamben's view is that eventually he says everyone is homo sacer, including very powerful people who run society, including Hitler. But how can being homo sacer strip some lives of value and empower others? I don't have an answer to this, but I have two possible understandings. One is that everyone becomes homo sacer twice. The first time is when everyone is born and is immediately made homo sacer so that political intervention into natural life is allowed. The second time is when that political intervention actually happens, but some people are granted rights in that intervention and others aren't.
Zu einer Gruppe zu gehören ist erst einmal eine natürliche Gegebenheit. Sie gehören zu irgendeiner Gruppe durch Geburt, immer. Jetzt zu einer Gruppe zu gehören, wie Sie es im zweiten Sinne meinen, nämlich sich zu organisieren, das ist etwas ganz anderes. Diese Organisation erfolgt immer unter Weltbezug. Das heißt, das, was diejenigen miteinander gemeinsam haben, die sich jetzt organisieren, ist, was man gewöhnlich Interesse nennt.
Another way of understanding this claim is that everyone has the potential to become someone who can be killed without consequence at any moment. And that's exactly the scary thing about states of exception. There is no consistent rule to be followed. Foucault saw this in his analysis of Nazi Germany, where it seemed like the Nazi state had a death drive. The more people it killed, the more targets it had to find. So over time, people who were originally safe became homo sacer. The Nazis even started killing some Germans near the end. As Hannah Arendt also pointed out, anyone can come to be a totalitarian machine's new target. Agamben's theory is not perfect. There are many more questions you may have about it, but I thought it was a very relevant and interesting analysis of political power and life. At the very least, it offers a useful framework to think about how some lives become devalued and who's doing the devaluing. You can definitely try to read his book, Homo Sacer, if you want to dive more into this topic. Thank you so much for watching, let's keep talking, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye! Thank you to my Patreons who support this channel, and I'm gonna go the other order that I usually do because egalitarianism. Or is it equity? No, equality. So today we're starting with Jesse, MJ, Deepto Chatterjee, Laura Clark, C-Dub, Lee Raz Levy, Sneezy Weezy, Dhruv Singhal, Sabrina Fior, Jeannie, Will, Soladosi Tania, Guilherme Goncalves, Bonzo, Stephen Bollinger, John Nguyen, JL_Arbor21, Zoe Alred, Love and Angels 420, Flawlessness.com.au, Depressed Laughter, Nietzsche is My Dad, Blueberry Hill, Rager 005, Jiao Goncalves, Servant of Malabogia, Brandon, Texas _ Suvi, Sam, Odie, Super Mutant Behemoth, Among Us Strip, Minimal Encourager, Nose, Remy Reyes, Shadow Lord, Guojie Ku, Elliot Erickson, Zixing Li, Adam Valon, Farman Panu, Kyle plus A, who's A Kyle, Michael Dufaux-Shard, Lucas Kaiser, Rajan Singh, Ronald Wilson, Frida Gomez Rios, AA, Kyle Bova, Plenty Pack, Pink Freud, Wish Young was here. Don't kill me about the pronunciation. Samya Zhu, Malpertuis, Ardent Nella, Extendo Trans, Cyrus Orion, Mireille, Min CRCR, David, Jerome's Cat, Sheldor, Jeremy Rodriguez, Leah Faston, Neo Steele, Rialo, Laura Stranyovsky. Did I get that right this time without Google Translate? George D, Leonardo, Cuddy Flam, George Jang, Florence, Drassel, iCroax, Papua_Itam, Ryan Yuki, Benny Arnold, Mikey Jeans, CJ, Ali, MRQ02, Joshua Bask, Ryan Jolift, Dusk M, William Bowen, Johnny Hubs, Trogdor the Burninator. What are you burning? Edrisal, Addison Drudge, Ruin, Jenka, Slayum, Brandon Duong, Dracos, Rusty Phillips, Namphon Trin, Ong Mamong, Mitrar, Zerno, I'm secretly Alan Watts, Kyle, Dane Snyder, Hole, Jeffrey Marvin Ferones, and DJ Mikey Z. This cat's name is also Mikey. Bye. I said that already. Okay.